Hey y'all, it's Kim. So today is September 11th, 2025, and I just felt like just kind of looking at a few things. Obviously, I like looking at different documents, government stuff, and anyway, this is no exception. But this is called, I think it's like a terrorist travel, something like that, plans. This had to do with, well, the 9/11 people and how they got into the United States. This is introduction, the factual overview of the September 11th border story. Terrorists travel for many reasons, including to train, communicate with other terrorists, collect funds, escape capture and interrogation, engage in surveillance of potential targets, and commit terrorist attacks. To avoid detection of their activities and objectives, while engaging in travel that necessitates using a passport, terrorists devote extensive resources to acquiring and manipulating passports, entry and exit stamps, and visas. The Al Qaeda terrorist organization was no exception. High level members of Al Qaeda were expert document forgers who taught other terrorists, including Muhammad Atta, the 9/11 ringleader, their tradecraft. The entry of the hijackers into the United States, therefore, represented the culmination of years of practice and experience in penetrating international borders. We introduce our monograph with the retelling of the September 11th events from the perspective of border security as we understand it today. The conspirators, 26 Al Qaeda terrorist conspirators, 18 Saudis, 2 Emiratis, 1 Egyptian, 1 Lebanese, 1 Moroccan, 1 Pakistani, and 2 Yemenis sought to enter the United States and carry out a suicide mission. The first of them began to acquire the means to enter 2 years and 5 months before the 9/11 attack. Intelligence about terrorist travel. 3 hijackers were known or knowable by intelligence authorities as Al Qaeda terrorists in early 2000, but their biographical information was not fully developed and communicated to border authorities for watch listing at U.S. consulates abroad, or it's by the State Department, and at the border by Immigration and Custom Border inspectors. The travel plans of all 3 also were known or knowable in 2000, in part because of cooperation from Arab and Asian country intelligence services and border authorities. The 19 hijackers used 364 aliases, including different spellings of their names and noms de guerre, whatever that is, as they passed through various countries. Their names were recorded by governments and their intelligence and border authorities. 3 were carrying Saudi passports containing a possible extremist indicator present in the passports of many Al Qaeda and other terrorists entering the United States as early as the First World Trade Center attack in 1993. This indicator had been analyzed by the CIA, FBI, or our border authorities for its significance. Indeed, passports seized by the FBI and terrorist investigations were not routinely made available to the CIA for analysis. 2 hijackers were carrying passports that had been manipulated in a fraudulent manner. They contained fraudulent entry exit stamps or cachets, probably inserted by Al Qaeda travel document forgers to hide travel to Afghanistan for terrorist training. Our analysis of their travel patterns suggests that several more hijackers whose passports did not survive the attacks were likely to have had similar false stamps. Let me turn this. It just keeps going on. Sorry. Okay. False stamps. Hold on. Where was I at? In their passports. The existence and significance of these stamps was not known to border authorities. 2 Saudis were carrying passports that might have been provided to them by a family member working in the Saudi passport ministry. The Saudi passport authority was rife with patronage and security weaknesses known by then to the State Department and CIA, but they were not the subject of intelligence analysis, diplomatic or security policy, or countermeasures. Visas: the 19 hijackers applied for 23 visas and obtained 22. Five other conspirators were denied U.S. visas. Two more obtained visas, but did not participate in the attack for various reasons. They began attempting to acquire U.S. visas in April of 1999, 2 years and 5 months before the attack. Consular officers were unaware of the potential significance of an indicator of potential extremism present in some Al Qaeda passports, had no information about fraudulent travel stamps that are associated with Al Qaeda, and were not trained in terrorist travel tactics generally. Two Yemenis were denied visas in Yemen for reasons of U.S. immigration law unrelated to terrorism. At the same time, two Saudi hijackers obtained visas in Saudi Arabia. When these two Saudis later showed up in Afghanistan, they were selected for the mission in part because they already had U.S. visas. Later, most of the operatives selected were Saudis who had little difficulty obtaining visas. In early 2000, four conspirators sought U.S. visas to learn how to become pilots in the plot. An Egyptian and a Lebanese obtained visas easily in Berlin because they had established ties to Germany and so did not look like intending immigrants. Both presented new passports. A Yemeni who wanted to be a pilot was repeatedly turned down for a visa because he did not have strong ties to Germany, failed to complete the necessary paperwork, and looked like an intending immigrant. 13 of the hijackers presented passports less than 3 weeks old when they applied for their visas, but the new passports caused no heightened scrutiny of their visa applications. Two hijackers lied on their visa applications in detectable ways, but were not further questioned about those lies. Two hijackers were interviewed for reasons unrelated to terrorism. Most simply had their applications approved and their passports stamped with the U.S. visa. Consular officers were not trained to detect terrorists in a visa interview. Terrorism concerns were handled through the watch list, and all the conspirators' names were checked against the terrorist watch list without producing a match. One Saudi, one Moroccan, and one Pakistani were each denied visas for reasons unrelated to terrorism. The last conspirator, the Pakistani, was denied on August 27, 2001 in the United Arab Emirates. The mastermind of the operation, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, used a travel facilitator to acquire a visa on July 23, 2001 in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, using an alias. And I did do a video. I think it's Michael Springman is the one that brought that up. He was in the State Department or whatever, the consular, whatever it is over there in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I think that was him. So anyway, because he was talking about getting visas for terrorists. But let's go on. So ports of entry. Once the operation was underway, the conspirators attempted to enter the United States 34 times over 21 months through 9 airports. They succeeded all but once. Border inspectors at U.S. airports were unaware of the potential significance of the indicators of possible terrorist affiliation in conspirators' passports and had no information about fraudulent travel stamps possibly associated with Al Qaeda. No inspectors or agents were trained in terrorist travel intelligence and document practices. The culture of the airports was one of travel facilitation and lax enforcement, with the exception of programs to interdict drug couriers and known criminals. When they began to arrive at the U.S. airports in January of 2000, the pilots traveled alone. With the exception of the two hijackers, the muscle operatives arrived between late April and late June 2001. They came in groups of 2 or 3, and in 4 cases were screened by the same inspector. All but one of the hijackers presented visitor visas that immigration inspectors used to decide whether to admit them as tourists or on business. All but 2 of the non-pilots were admitted as tourists and were granted automatic 6-month stays. This allowed them to maintain a legal immigration status through the end of the operation. One of the two non-pilots admitted on business was granted a 1 month stay. He, along with another of the non-pilot operatives, was in violation of immigration law for months before the attack. The one pilot who came in on a student visa never showed up for school, thereby violating the terms of his U.S. visa. Another of the pilots came in on a tourist visa, yet began flight school immediately, also violating the terms of his U.S. visa. This pilot came in a total of 7 times on a tourist visa while in school. In both cases, the pilots violated the law after their entry into the United States. 5 hijackers attempting entry were referred by primary inspectors for a more intensive review by secondary inspectors. One pilot was referred at 2 entries. In one case by a customs inspector trained to look for drug couriers, and in the other by an immigration inspector thinking the pilot might be an intending immigrant. One pilot was referred for having the wrong visa, and one non-pilot hijacker for failing to have a visa. 2 others were referred for failing to complete their arrival and customs forms and for being unable to communicate with the inspectors. No lookouts or visa revocations were posted, alerting border authorities to the terrorist association of 2 of the hijackers until after each has entered the United States for the last time. 4 hijackers were admitted after the secondary inspectors who interviewed them were unable to or did not verify information supplied by the operative, misunderstood the law, or failed to follow procedures. One was interviewed at length by a border inspector. The inspector concluded on the basis of his hostile and arrogant behavior and contradictory statements that he was unlikely to comply with U.S. immigration law and posed a risk. He was denied entry. The inspector was backed up by his superior, but acted in the face of a general expectation of leniency towards Saudi citizens at that airport. These entries occurred during a period when approximately 20 million people applied for visas and more than 10 million people came into the United States through 220 airports of entry. In the United States, 3 hijackers filed applications for change of status to extend their stays in the United States and stayed in compliance with the U.S. immigration laws through September 2001. These were among nearly 600,000 new applications received in September of 2000 and were added to a backlog of 3 million others. 2 pilots attached the same supporting financial documents to their immigration benefit applications and were adjudicated by the same official in the summer of 2001. The pending but unadjudicated benefits application assisted 2 hijackers in persuading border inspectors to admit them during secondary inspections when they try to re-enter the United States. The adjudications were premised on the validity of their attendance at flight school, but in fact, this school should not have been certified to accept foreign nationals. Another hijacker's application allowed him to stay in the United States legally for an extra 6 months. While the applications were pending, one hijacker appeared at an Immigration and Naturalization Service office, or the INS, in Florida and requested a longer length of stay for a companion, possibly another hijacker. That would have enabled the other man to remain through September when his own visa expired. The inspector refused that request and, realizing that the length of stay granted this hijacker during his secondary inspection was too long, rolled it back to midsummer 2001. The hijacker departed the United States in July and returned again 10 days later, thereby acquiring a new length of stay that extended beyond September 11, 2001. On August 23, 2001, the CIA provided biographical identification information about 2 of the hijackers to border and law enforcement authorities. The CIA and FBI considered the case important, but there was no way of knowing whether either hijacker was still in the country because a border exit system Congress authorized, excuse me, because a border exit system Congress authorized in 1996 was never implemented. One of the two overstayed his visa by less than 6 months without an exit system in place at the border tied to law enforcement database. There was no way to establish with certainty that he remained in the United States. Thus, there was no risk that his immigration law violations would be visible to law enforcement, and there was no risk of immigration enforcement action of any kind. Immediate response to the attacks. Immediately after the 9/11 attacks, Immigration and Customs leadership jointly put in place their agency's most stringent security precautions, in the process nearly shutting down our borders. The backed up traffic at the land borders caused a commercial crisis because resources were already strained. Thousands of other enforcement officials in the National Guard, Border Patrol, and state and local police were needed to help border authorities reduce wait times for those seeking U.S. entry for tourism or business. Under Justice Department direction, the FBI and the INS initiated a series of counterterrorism related security programs using immigration law violations as a predicate to interview, detain, and in many cases deport aliens from countries with possible ties to Al Qaeda. Also, at the urging of the Justice Department, the State Department, together with the FBI, initiated a series of programs to heighten scrutiny of visa applications from countries with an Al Qaeda presence. In the weeks after September 11th, after the national airspace reopened, at least 10 flights of Saudi nationals departed the United States. One flight, sponsored by the Saudi government, carried relatives of Saudi fugitive Osama bin Laden. Passengers on the flights were screened by the FBI prior to their departure, but the allegations of high-level government involvement spurred theories that passengers received special treatment. Oh, and so here's some other stuff. Some footnotes. Let me make sure this is it. I'll read this part. So, intelligence report interrogation of a detainee, October 23rd, 2002, which I've gone through all that Senate torture report, or not the whole thing, but I've gone through quite a bit of it. After Ramzi bin al-Shibh, he's one of those in there, failed to obtain a U.S. visa in May of 2001, Osama bin Laden asked bin al-Shibh to act as a contact between himself and Mohammed Atta to relay operational details that were too sensitive to trust to telephone or email. His travel in this capacity illustrates the importance of courier travel to Al Qaeda planning and operations. To facilitate his travel, KSM provided bin al-Shibh with a genuine Saudi passport in the name of Hassan Ali al-Asiri and a round-trip ticket to Kuala Lumpur, whatever, Malaysia, where he was supposed to meet Atta. While in Kuala Lumpur, bin al-Shibh applied for a Yemeni passport. When Atta was delayed, bin al-Shibh went to Bangkok. Because Atta was still unable to meet him, bin al-Shibh traveled to Amsterdam on his Yemeni passport, took a train to Hamburg, and bought a ticket to Spain to meet Atta. Intelligence report interrogation of a detainee October 1st, 2002. Bin al-Shibh finally met up with Atta in July of 2001 in Spain to discuss sensitive operational aspects of the 9/11 plot. Specifically, bin al-Shibh told Atta that UBL's instructions were to attack the U.S. Congress, the World Trade Center, and the Pentagon, the symbols of America. Atta told bin al-Shibh, who passed the information to UBL through KSM, that planning had been completed with no problems and it could be operational in 5 to 6 weeks. The CIA analytic report analysis of passports, November 20th of 2002, page 1 and 3. Atta, who reportedly learned these techniques in Afghanistan, cleaned Ramzi bin al-Shibh's passport of its Pakistani visa and travel caches. In addition to the 19 hijackers, the 7 other conspirators who sought visas were Muhammad al-Qahtani, a Saudi, Saeed al-Ghamdi. Some of these names are in the Senate torture report, by the way. A Saudi, not the hijacker. Mushabib, I guess it's how you say Hamlin, a Saudi. Zachariah Esbar, a Moroccan. Ali Abdul Aziz Ali, a Pakistani. Ramzi bin Ashib, a Yemeni, and Tafiq bin Atash, a Yemeni, also known as Khalid, whatever. An eighth individual who was a possible pilot in the 9/11 operation, Zacharias Masawi, I think that's how you say it, entered under the visa waiver program. And CIA analytic report names excuse me, I don't know why I said five, name variants and aliases of 11th of September hijackers and associates, and that was March 2004. So anyway, these people found a way to get here so they could do all this plotting. And of course, America didn't stop it, obviously. But anyway, so if you're watching any of the Senate torture reports and any of the, oh crap, where did it go? What happened to my purse? I don't know what happened. This thing flipped over. Anyway, I don't know where did my face go? It disappeared. Anyway, I guess I'll just talk to y'all later. Bye. It just disappeared on me.